Perfection is a myth, and in tech leadership, it's actually a liability. I've seen it again and again. A CTO who's so afraid of making mistakes that they stop learning, stop making steps forward. They hesitate whenever they have to make a decision, whenever they have to hire someone, whenever they have to contemplate whether to do this or that. And this fear is very natural when you come from a technical background, because in software it's a lot easier to know you're doing things right. You can tell whether the code works or not. That's not the case when it comes to real leadership. And if you're afraid of making mistakes, that can actually end your career as a CTO, as any tech leader. If there's anything worse than making mistakes, is not learning from them. So let's talk about how you can learn and make any mistake into a growth opportunity, because I promise you, your CEO is watching and they're not looking for mistakes, they're looking for how fast you're learning. And if you don't show that, you're in for a bad time. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Aviv Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive coach and consultant, and I help people just like you upgrade themselves and upgrade their organizations to create organizations worth leading. Life's too short to lead mediocre teams. If you want to learn more about what I do, you can check out the link to my website in the description. Now, let's move on to first realizing the CTO perfection trap. Many leaders coming from a technical background believe that they always have to be right. They have this sort of past fixation that makes them move way too slowly. When we're trying to be perfect, even if you're not telling that explicitly to yourself, if now as I'm talking, you're thinking, yeah, who wants to be perfect? Of course I cannot be that. But the question is, are you actually realizing that, or do you just understand it? When we think that we cannot make mistakes, that mistakes are so dangerous for the company, for us, we usually end up in a position where we don't learn as fast, we don't experiment as fast as we can, we sometimes end up in a position where we have some sort of paralysis going on because we're just so afraid of taking any step. The current position we're in feels safer, that's our comfort zone. However, it means that we're not going to progress as fast as the company is going to want. This slow delivery ends up with a mode where you're avoiding mistakes, but usually it also comes at the cost of avoiding your impact. You cannot do as much as you would like to do being so cautious. When you check, before crossing the road, check each direction, that's good. If you're going to be standing there checking for 20 minutes, probably you're never going to get home, and that's not what we want to do. Actually, life is a lot simpler. You're going to be making mistakes anyway. You might as well realize that and utilize those mistakes rather than trying to avoid them completely, because luckily, I'm assuming you're not working at NASA. You can allow yourself to be making some mistakes. Given that, let's assume that we're going to be making some mistakes and start moving forward, expecting those to arise and learning how to utilize them properly. Because a mistake is not that bad. What's really bad is not learning from it. And this is actually connecting directly to what I'm hearing from so many startup CEOs. When they're not sure about the ability of their tech leaders, usually it's not because they're making mistakes, but it is because, looking from their point of view as CEOs, they cannot tell whether you're learning fast enough. Their worry is that you're going to have the organization outgrow you. You will not be able to implement the learning as fast as needed to stay ahead, and therefore you will become some sort of weight on the organization, something they cannot allow. Again, the mistakes themselves aren't usually the issue. The issue is whether you can communicate and show how you're going to learn from it, how you're going to actually become better, and how you're going to ensure that you're not going to repeat the same types of mistakes. The fireable offense usually isn't making a mistake, it's refusing to learn from it. When I feel as a CEO that someone under me is making mistakes and is not aware of it, or refuses to accept it, refuses to change their way, they come up with excuses, etc. when we talk about it, that's when I get worried, because what I'm thinking then is whether things will ever improve or improve as fast as they ought to. So Instead of doing that, let's talk about the steps you can make in order to leverage your mistakes, create that trust between you and others around you, and actually upgrade yourself as a CEO, as a leader, so you constantly become better in what you do. So at least those mistakes have an upside. And let's start listing the 4 habits of successfully failed CTOs, those who fail and yet become successful. And habit number 1 is openly admitting your mistakes. When you keep shoving away blame, when you want to have this sort of guarantee that nothing is associated with you if it's not a pure and concise success, you're actually telling people you're not confident enough in your skills, or even worse, that you are not able to recognize when you're making mistakes. And especially in a leadership position, we cannot trust someone who doesn't have the ability of reading the situation, of realizing what we're in and how it has to be treated. So don't sugarcoat it. Don't try to avoid it. Don't use all sorts of terms as in, yeah, maybe this could have gone better, but be real. Address the issue. Be the first to own it. Say, yes, we made a mistake there. I made a mistake there. I should have done things differently. I realize that, and now we're going to learn from it. I'm going to maximize that. When you openly admit to that, when you stop it with the excuses, that is the first step, and that already makes you better than others and creates that trust, or allows the possibility of creating the trust. Because again, if you're trying to be Teflon, if you're trying to ensure that nothing sticks to you, you're going to be making people around you worried. Moving on to habit number 2, this is about realizing that you're going to be making mistakes, so you openly, actively ask for feedback. When you do this regularly, because you know you're going to be making mistakes, you're telling people around you, be it people reporting to you, your peers, the CEO, constantly asking, what do you think about what we're doing? Am I missing something? Would you have done it differently? Is anything that we're doing surprising you? And this is something that I highly, highly recommend drilling into people reporting to you, having them learn this chutzpah, learning how to speak up and tell their boss when they think things are wrong or when things don't make sense to them. Because when we have that, first of all, we're reducing the odds of making a big mistake because we're going to recognize those mistakes earlier. But also, whenever a mistake has been done, I want to ask people what they think about this. Were there things that made them, their spidey senses tingle, and yet they didn't speak up? Why? When did they realize that things are going wrong? What were you missing? Having this, and this is not even just about understanding the issue itself, but understanding the culture and the operating system in your organization, understanding why people aren't speaking up, understanding why they're afraid. Because if someone's afraid of speaking up, they're probably afraid about telling you the truth about a bunch of other things, and that's not a good thing, right? So ask for this feedback. Not only will it make you avoid some mistakes or reduce the impact that they have, but also it will ensure that with time people will speak up even more. And when we're talking to our peers, when we're talking to people around us, when they see that you're asking for this feedback and you don't automatically go into defense mode, but you actually listen, you actually take notes, you actually think about what they're saying, this again creates even more trust because I see that I've got someone I can speak with. This is not, again, someone who's trying to bat away any sort of feedback, but someone who wants to improve. Without internalizing the feedback, without accepting it, you're not likely to actually be learning from your mistakes. Habit number 3 is having good postmortems. I'm not just talking about, the regular postmortems I'm hoping you're doing, like when there's an outage. I'm talking about postmortems for your own initiatives, and some of these can be personal. So first of all, in general, we can have postmortems at the organization level about how we try to tackle the OKRs this quarter and how did that fail. Or we expected to hire X people that failed. We actually saw a lot more churn internally this year. Let's understand why. Postmortems also don't have to happen because something really went bad, but because you realize that something almost went really bad. You don't need to just learn from your mistakes. You should also be learning from the close calls. However, let's talk about personal postmortems. This is a bit hard to say. Personal postmortems are something that we don't do enough because it feels odd. Maybe you don't know how to do it. And again, yeah, I'm sure it's a lot easier when you have a coach working with you, having the personal postmortem be not just something you write in Notion and then forget about, but actually having someone ask you questions. I know some people who have tried doing this with your LLM du jour because it helps you get at least some feedback. That's something. But personal postmortems are about thinking, how did I handle that conversation? How did I handle the planning for this quarter? How was I when it comes to my communication with my peers about that issue, about me trying to push for this initiative, about having quality issues and why didn't we speak about this earlier? Or why did things get this bad before we started acting on it? This is not just about the company, the culture, but about yourself so you can identify where are your opportunities for growth here. Again, we want to extract everything we can out of every failure, out of every mistake, so we don't miss out an opportunity to get better. For example, maybe you realize that it has been your personal decision to have more coaching for your people. You want to be a better coach, but hey, a quarter has passed and nothing really has happened. You can postmortem that with yourself to assess whether you're actually making the time for it. What's making you not do it? Are you fearful of something? Do you feel like you don't have a certain skill? Do you feel like it might not have a good enough ROI to be warranted the time? Whatever it is, decide how you're going to be doing things, how you're going to be improving with that postmortem as your tool to learn. So you don't just brush things off immediately, but you take the time to assess what went wrong, why, and how to improve. By the way, if coaching specifically is something you want to get better at, do check out my free short ebook about the impact coaching framework, especially for tech executives who want to start implementing coaching easily in their teams. The link will be in the video description. And last habit, once you've implemented all the above, you've probably learned something, right? Now, habit number 4 is sharing your learning. Have people see what you have learned, how you're going to try to do things differently. Either when it comes to processes in your organization, either when it comes to your own personal skills. If your CEO can see that you're now changing how you're handling certain processes, that you have different meetings, that you have a new checklist, that you're asking to invest in some coaching for yourself so you can be better when it comes to communication, time management, whatever. When you do that, when you show others how you're going to improve, again, this loops back to the trust to ensure that even when you're failing, no one will mark you as a failure, but as a human being that's constantly getting better. And also, it will help others start being aware and looking for where you're improving. Because when you sort of plant that thought in my head that you're going to be doing things differently, that you're going to try to improve, you're priming me to actually notice that. Circling back to what we talked about earlier, to getting proper feedback, when you told me what you're going to be doing differently and you told me you wanted feedback, I will let you know if I notice that you're doing things where there's a dissonance between what you said and what you're actually doing, etc. So this whole loop makes you better because every time that you do it and implement it fully, including sharing your learning, you will make others help you even more, so you keep learning faster and faster. And your learning curve will actually go very, very nicely. And when I see that as your boss, as the CEO, that often makes me a lot more comfortable, because that gives me enough trust that even if we're gonna have mistakes, because again, no one's perfect, at least we're learning very rapidly and we continue on improving. The more open you are about your learning, the more trust you build. Again, people make mistakes. That's why pilots have debriefing. That's why in sports, even the best players have conversations after the game to assess where they can improve and have feedback from their coaches. This is all very natural. What's unnatural is trying to hide away from this reality. If you realize that that's the case, you're going to be improving much faster and in an open way that creates the trust that you need so you don't just end up being a failure. So you're going to fail. That's for certain. The question is, how are you going to do it? How are you going to learn from it? And whether you're going to be turning those into opportunities to improve or just another milestone on your path down the road to nowhere. We want to ensure that you keep improving and that you build trust as you're making mistakes. Yes, it's possible. You just need to be doing it correctly. Again, this is not about how you fail. It's about what you do after you fail. CTOs aren't judged solely by the mistakes, but about how they learn from them, what they do after the actual mistakes. I hope you got something out of this to ensure that you're gonna be trending upwards when it comes to your learning curve. And if you like this, please do like and subscribe because it really helps me get to other people who need to hear these things. And let me know in the comments about what maybe was your most spectacular fail recently. Thank you.